Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese here with another exciting episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. Super excited to speak to this woman who has an amazing career, amazing stories to tell. So please welcome the former VP of Sales, which we'll get into, of Eventbrite, literally a household name, Chloe Stewart. So welcome aboard and thanks for coming along.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. I feel really grateful to be here. So thanks for thinking of me. Hopefully I won't bore you and your listeners too much, maybe just a little.
No, I hope not. I hope not. So the obvious question, right? 7 years at Eventbrite. Where was it when you started? Where is it now that you've left?
Yes, when I started at Eventbrite, the team that I was responsible for was a total of about 15 reps that was comprised of both SDRs and AEs, verticalized and all in San Francisco. And by the time that I moved away from my responsibility over that same team, we had about 20 SDRs, about an additional 25 AEs, 6 sales leaders, the majority of which we moved to our Nashville Center of Excellence location for inside sales, and then had in-market enterprise reps. So drastic changes over the course of time there. With COVID and seeing that public gatherings are basically illegal right now, and seeing that that's how Eventbrite makes money, the sales team does look, I think, pretty different globally at this point. The business made the decision to sort of reshift and focus more on the self-service customer acquisition channel that Eventbrite is also very, very well known for and excels at, and sort of moving away from the sales motion. Again, for good reason, since what they do is, not really legal right now. So
What was the company size overall in terms just of employees? Like where was it? Where did it go in that time?
I think I was around the 200th employee when I came on board in early 2013, and I think 1,500 total employees earlier this year, and then with the downsizing, that's pre-April, I should say. But yeah, so some pretty wild growth, and the business also grew globally. So when I started in 2013, there were definitely some offices across the globe, but we had opened Melbourne, Australia. We had some folks in Singapore, New Zealand, a great Latin American headquarters in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And then similarly opened a center of excellence for sales in Cork, Ireland, and sort of revamping the European strategy to mirror what we were doing in North America. So really exciting growth, not just in terms of headcount, but also in terms of kind of the global reach and the market expansion.
What did you do to manage all the different time zones that you were operating in?
Yeah, so that was fun. I think by the approach that Eventbrite took when it came to sales and more of the customer-facing roles was definitely sort of have the market direct and drive that strategy. So sort of looking at each office, we really tried to disrupt the idea that San Francisco was headquarters. Like it just wanted to change that, even if it was philosophically, so that leaders and folks working in other offices like really did feel like they had the autonomy to make their own decisions that of course played the best within their unique markets with their unique customers. So with that all said and done, like there was that autonomy there, which was really nice. When I took on the global role in 2019, it was challenging to say the least for managing time zones, but you just learn to like take calls at 3 a.m. and work late. And then also I think everyone is really considerate and knows that they have to do the same thing and we have to do the same thing, so let's try to cooperate and be flexible there. But yeah, a lot of just like weird time zones.
I think a lot of people might hear this and say, well, how do you do that over an extended period of time? Like it can't be sustainable for you to take calls at 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific and 3 a.m. Pacific and all this kind of stuff. How frequent were those calls? Was there any tips and tricks that you could give people managing a global team or even a domestic team that has 3 or 4 different time zones, just to make your life a little more normal, a little more sane, a little less broken up and interrupted in the middle of the night? Is there anything?
Absolutely.
Or is there anything that worked, or is this just like the law of the land, the way it is when you have a global team?
I think that there's definitely some best practices around understanding what are the sort of more primary time zones. So for example, like poor Australia, poor Melbourne, like they definitely had to be a little bit more flexible than say Europe and North America, and Latin America as well, just because like, I mean, they just have a fucking crazy time zone comparatively speaking. So, you know, they had to be a little bit more flexible than others. So one best practice, of course, is to ensure that you're staggering your pipeline meetings or your revenue war room meetings, et cetera, on a certain cadence. So one might be early, one might be late, one might be midday. So like everyone, at least one, you know, for one of those three in the cadence, I think is going to be a little screwed, and just sort of like have that balance so it feels equitable and a little bit fair. From my perspective, I think it also matters to like, what is your strategy? So my role as the VP of Global Sales was a little bit untraditional in the sense that I didn't have direct management over the global teams. It was almost more akin to being a consultant, like that's how I compared it, where I was responsible for influencing the performances of those teams, but the GMs in each market were actually my peers. And so with that all said and done, I had to really understand like what are the outcomes I'm trying to drive through my strategy, and part of that to start was operationalizing and getting the teams to just like be these well-oiled machines. So I say that because I think once you understand what your sort of remit is in your role, then you might have late nights and early mornings to start. But once you get those teams to operate how they should be, then you can kind of give a longer leash, right? And you're just, you are spending time with the leaders to make sure that they're driving consistent performance. They're doing things like providing information to you in a proactive way, not to like micro or to create more like admin work, but like they're serving up the right level of information so that again, they can operate a little bit more autonomously, and they don't need me or anyone else in their business 24/7.
What?
Right. So when we considered Nashville as almost our center of excellence, in the sense that those were definitely the inside sales motion, as well as our like more technical client services or customer success teams were there too. And our strategic relationship managers were just, were more on the enterprise side and in market as well. So yeah, and I call it center of excellence because it's meant to be like highly programmatic, a repeatable and scalable motion, obviously, but one that just like once you get those operating rhythms in place, like you just press go and they should go. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be like really strong frontline managers coaching and doing that stuff, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So again, when I started at Eventbrite and began to manage the team that I was responsible for, most of my time in that role was North American acquisition. And then of course I was in that role for a little over 6 years. So like definitely evolved and some changes here and there with who I was responsible for. But we only had that team really focused on two different verticals, like B2B and B2C, just for the sake of being convenient with language here. But what we were beginning to realize is that with the business strategy and with the overall go-to-market strategy, what does the ideal customer profile, of course, really look like? And how are we creating a team that not only is targeting that to be effective and efficient, but that we're actually having a team, like a process and our methodology to be totally tight and in line with the buyer's journey. And so I think just taking a step back and strategically looking at how can sales as an acquisition channel and as a retention channel, of course, align to the business strategy overall, and then sort of work backwards to create the process that is going to help reach those outcomes. Yeah. Totally. I think an example of that would be segmenting the North American team into 4. So we had SMB, mid-market, large accounts, and enterprise. And Eventbrite defined that a little bit differently than traditional. It was more around the like average contract value versus like employee number at those businesses. That sort of segmentation strategy came out of like really understanding where can we make the most impact in either the shortest amount of time, so hence SMB and mid-market, and where is there going to be a little bit more like go-to-market experimentation and obviously like bigger, more wallet share and dollar signs with large accounts and enterprise. And building out those 4 segments took 6 years to do. One thing that we learned with experimentation, Richard, to answer that question, is that the business decided to we had like an incubation team, for instance, where we were either developing proprietary solutions or through acquisition had other solutions to sell in addition to Eventbrite's core solution. So we decided to let's build this enterprise motion, build this enterprise team. It was super exciting. It took us like a year and a half to like just even get the infrastructure in place. Well, the business decided that that wasn't the direction that we wanted to go. So we had to pull back. That team was, I think, 6 or 7 reps, and we ended up scaling that back to 2 because we decided that we wanted to move again more in that transactional, like just ticket volume play versus more of a solution sell. And so that experimentation was both defined by what the business's direction looked like, but in addition to that, and as a salesperson, like for me, almost more importantly, what do customers want to buy? Because that's what's going to help them reach their goals or mitigate their pains. And so that was a constant conversation within the business, one where, a product-driven company is like, this is what we want to do from a product perspective, and from a sales view, this is what we know our customers want. And sort of taking those to that, like sometimes can be a little bit of a conflict, but taking that as our framework to then understand how do you set up teams that can accomplish all of that. But then also, and I'll stop talking into this, but then also being less precious and knowing how much time do you spend understanding if that's an effective strategy or not, and when are you able to pull back. And we had plenty of moments where we realized that we either pulled back too soon, like for example, we sunsetted SMB and we should not have, and when did we maybe invest too much like in enterprise versus working more in the mid-market.
I'm going to read your job titles off at Eventbrite because I want people to understand this journey, and then I'm going to ask you about it. So here they go. And if I screw this up, feel free to interrupt me, but account executive, sales team lead, sales manager, North America, enterprise sales manager, North America, director, North American sales, senior director, North American sales, VP global sales. This reads like somebody's dream of career growth, of like you build into a comp plan, right? Like this is how somebody keeps moving up. When you started as an account executive there, was it even anywhere on your radar at all that you wanted to be a VP of sales one day, let alone at that company that you started at?
Oh, hell no. I still don't know if I want to be a VP of sales, to be honest. I wanted to move into management. Like that was definitely a goal of mine, but not so much for like the quote or the like, hey, I'm more senior, more for the impact you can have as a coach and working in other businesses where one of which coaching was hyper important and seeing the impact of that, and then working in another business where coaching was a little less important and seeing like the negative impact of that. Like that's where I knew I wanted to. For me, from what I understood, management seemed like the venue to do that. I didn't really know more. But yeah, staying at Eventbrite for 7+ years, like that was never in my purview. That was never something I thought about. I'm definitely a bit of a serial monogamist when it comes to work. It might be like my Midwesternism, but like 7+ years in the Valley can also be a disadvantage and be, sort of like not a good look here and there. So definitely not something I had sought out to do.
So it's interesting to hear you say that you're not sure if you want to be a VP of sales now. Can you elaborate on that? Is there something that makes you feel that way? Is there some part of the role that you're just not sure of yet, or is your passion starting to go in a different direction?
Great questions. I was maybe being a little tongue-in-cheek there. I right now I am exploring that role in for future opportunities. So that's where I want to be. I think what I'm seeing and working in tech and like continuing to work in tech is that, I mean, you guys know, like it's lonely sometimes, like the VP of sales plus position, especially in product driven businesses or tech companies, like you're a bit of the black sheep. And not just, I mean, like I'm tattooed and whatever, I'm weird. So like that's fine for me, but like it can be a continued challenge to educate the business over and over on like why sales is important and what sales does and why sales can't turn your business around overnight. It's just you don't have that same peer group that I think other VP roles in different business units or departments have, and so it can be a challenge. The job can be harder for that.
Yeah, I agree with 95% of what you said. I think that the peer group is out there now in a way that didn't used to be out there, and I think you get put forth a little bit of effort, but there's a lot more people like myself, and I don't want to name any other names, but people kind of speaking out against the system, so to speak, right? Like neither one of us, I would argue at least, neither one of us, you or I, fit the prototype of like a VP of sales, right? You're a woman leading sales organization, your arms are all tattooed up, as you said. I look like a homeless person. I dress the way I did in high school still today, right? Like, we don't fit the bill, but this is us, like we have assaulted the system in some way, which I love. Like the rebel in me is all about that. But the peer group is there. Like there's a lot of us who've been through the ringer here now more than once. Yeah. And kind of lean on each other for support and whatnot, because you're right, it is super lonely. We are the first ones who are going to get fired. If anything goes wrong, every single time. We constantly have to justify our existence to people who built these products. And then we constantly have to explain to them how sales works. I totally get it. And you've got to decide whether or not, you want to sign up for that, but you don't have to go through it alone. You got to just go out there and network with everybody who's been in that role a few times and lean on folks, for support. So I think if you do go down that path, this is something that, you might want to work on exploring, because you've been at one company for 7.5 years, right? So you've got this arguably kind of myopic view of what it's like to be a VP of sales out there. Whereas I'm the opposite. Like your stint at Eventbrite, that's 3 gigs for me. Yeah. That's 3 times that I've scaled from 0 to 25. Not to say that one is better than the other, just very different and gives perhaps a different perspective.
1,000%. And I think what I have been already learning so much more of after leaving Eventbrite in April is like from, guys like you, both of you, where there is this network. And so really, like, I think for me, understanding the network outside of your particular role, like your business, like how do you do that? And it's in the past, it's been a turnoff to do networking in sales, because I'm also, which like maybe like you guys can both relate to this to some extent, sales was not something that I had ever thought I was going to land in either. And so I think that I am still fighting a perception of like, oh, sales, despite the fact that like my entire career after graduate school has been in sales, and my entire career, I am assuming until I retire, will most likely be in sales, either explicitly or implicitly, right? And so I'm still trying to get over my bias, I think, of like networking with like having to go to like drink craft brews with some bros. Like that's not how I want to spend my time. That sounds awful, but that's not how I want to spend my time. But I'm learning through like you guys and what you're doing that there are other people who are like-minded. And if you're not, that's fine too. I need to learn from other perspectives, obviously, who are doing things in sales that are really meaningful. And that's how I can find mentorship too. I think it's been interesting, not to like segue, but I'm going to. Mentorship is something that's been top of mind for me after ending my career at Eventbrite and realizing that this is not meant to sound super cocky, but it's kind of cocky. The mentors that I had, I may have outgrown. And so how do I find, meaningful mentorship and also find a community within sales overall that might not be within the company that I'm working for? So that's like, I just repeated what you said like in 18 different ways. Sorry about that. I'm a salesperson, but that's totally, I feel you. And I totally agree with you.
I love that you outgrew your mentors, but that to me is also a good sign of a mentor, is to say, I'm supposed to get you from here to here, right? Look,
Yeah.
unless you can get, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or, something of that level to be your mentor, and even then you could outgrow them because of their myopic view of their world, right? They don't
Yeah.
remember, do the day to day. But this actually brings me back to something. So in 2013, 2014, you're growing, you're in your sales job. Where did you go for advice? Did Eventbrite have a strong internal component to help with that? Obviously, you're a woman in sales growing up in 2013, 2014. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. The first boss that I had when I begrudgingly found myself in a sales role, my first sales role, was and continues to be probably one of the best salespeople I've ever worked for and worked with. And she was so different than me in the sense that she just was seemingly fearless. And the things that would embarrass me, like, well, if I ask someone for something and they say no, like that's humiliating. And she was like, yeah, Chloe, if they say no, they say no. Like that's what? Like what? How is? Then you move on. Like she just like couldn't understand that. And so I learned so much from her in terms of just like psychology in sales, how to be like an incredible outbounder, how to be strategic, but also how to ensure that you are creating long-term solutions for your customers so they want to be your partner over and over, but also pushing back when they're not right. So she was just a gift. And also I had never done sales in that capacity before. So she was somebody who I just learned. I still reference things that Jamie Tadlock taught me back in like 2006, 2007. Additionally, when I was at Eventbrite, I was also hired by a woman, Nicole Brambilla, who is the GM of North America, and she's brilliant. And she became a really strong peer of mine to some extent too. So I need to learn a lot from her, but she brought me in a different way where it was more like an equal level of respect. And she just assumed that I would know how to do it and would do it. And she's the one who really helped like kickstart my career at Eventbrite. So I owe her a lot. And so as a partner, almost like as like if she and I were founders of a company, like I felt like we had that relationship, and that was really brilliant. Additionally, there was our former CRO at Eventbrite, who now is the CRO of Compass, Matt Rosenberg, is somebody else who I continue to go to learn more and to just get other perspectives. Just probably one of the brilliant people I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I took the job at Eventbrite, like in large part because of Matt. And he's somebody who, despite being CRO of this, super successful business, he has time for everyone, and that was something that I learned too. So I still have this amazing network of folks that I've learned from and continue to learn from, but I think what I'm missing is those alternate perspectives that are coming from outside of the business. So Eventbrite, to again, long-winded answer your question, Richard, Eventbrite gave me lots of these opportunities to learn from people and to get that coaching and get that mentorship, but I haven't really explored outside of those walls. And that is like a massive myth on my part,
Yeah. How did you get into sales? You did gender studies in school and got your master's in that, and you were a graduate teaching assistant. Like, I remember I was in graduate school at Arizona State, and I was teaching undergraduate classes, and then disaster happens to me, and years later I end up in sales. I'm wondering, how did you go from master's program, graduate teaching assistant, and now Chloe's in sales? How did that happen?
Yeah, totally. My plan was to continue my education and to get my PhD and to be teaching at the university level. That was like my big plan. But two things really happened. One, I finished graduate school, and holy shit, is that expensive. So I graduated and was like, oh man, I don't have any money. I was like a research assistant, right? Like I was, and a TA, like I was making that and had loans or whatever. And the first job that hired me out of grad school was a sales role at Learn It. And I thought that was going to be temporary. I thought that was a way for me to like pay my rent and pay off some of my debt while I, started to apply for PhD programs. So that didn't happen because then suddenly 2007 turned around the corner, and the university was like one of the first major institutions to get hit by, what became the recession, obviously, in 2008. And the first programs that were beginning to lose funding and pause tenure tracking were the programs that I cared about. So gender studies, cultural studies, anything like that that had a little more of like a social political slant to it. That's what I wanted to do. And I saw that like, oh shit, okay, something's happening here. So I stuck around my sales job for a little bit longer. And then the true recession hit in 2008. And that was pretty eye-opening for me. And what I found out while my plan for my future was just sort of scrapped in that sense, I ended up being really good at sales, which was like horrifying. Like that was a horrifying moment to like realize. And I really actually liked it, which was hard to admit to.
But why did you even apply the first time? Like how did that happen? I mean, for me, it was like similar in the sense of, holy cow, I need to somehow live in the Bay Area and it's really expensive here. And the only thing I could think of to make money, and lots of it, is sales. So it was totally strategic. I knew nothing about sales. I knew nothing about business. Was it a strictly like monetarily driven decision for you?
It was. And it wasn't even like you took it, you were like way smarter than I was, where you were like, how can I make like decent money potentially? I was like, how do I just get this negative sign away from my checking account and my bank balance, you know? And I applied to a lot of jobs on Craigslist, OG Craigslist. And the first job offer that I got was this sales role. And that, I mean, like, it's just that story. Like that's how I tumbled into it. What I like about that story and what I like about your story, Scott, and like Richard, I'd be interested in hearing from you too, is that one of the things that I think is really important about sales is that it is, at least theoretically, really democratic. I consider it like the running of sports. Like if you can physically run, you don't need equipment or a gym membership. Like you just can go outside or go inside and like run. Like that to me is so democratic. With sales, I was this overeducated, broke grad student, but I had never cold called in my life. Like I had sold at like the grocery store co-op that I used to work at. Like I had done that, but I had never sold in the sense that this business was asking me to sell. And yet I could. I also have the privilege to do that, right? It's easy. I had access to it where I know a lot of folks don't have access. So that's why I say it's theoretically democratic. But with sales, you can start as a BDR or an SDR, whether you're just finishing school or if later on in your career you want to pivot. There's just like less of a barrier to entry to a sales career than I think some other types of roles have. And I love that about sales. I think that that's like a really scrappy sort of democratic piece of it. And that's what helped me get this job. I had zero experience and then was sort of the gateway drug into my long career now in sales.
Yeah, I can relate to your story a ton because I love that you just call it the gateway drug. I mean, I remember closing my first deal and thinking, ooh, that was amazing. I want that to happen again. And on some level, I've been like addicted to that feeling for 16 plus years now. And I'm just consistently chasing the dragon, trying to get more
totally
and all that. Yeah.
When you were growing up, Chloe, were you competitive? Were you into sports, not into sports? Were you, what were you like then?
No. And like exercising has like saved my brain during quarantine, which like, oh yeah, who knew that like everything people have said about exercising is like totally true. Like you feel really good and it's like fun to like spend time doing that and whatever. So no, like I was the kid growing up who hated sports. I was the punk rock kid. Like I liked, art and I liked reading books and I liked when I got older seeing bands play and stuff like that and collecting records. I have tons of records because it's so easy to move. Why I do that, I don't know. And sports to me was like not just like, did I not want to do it because I also am kind of inherently lazy. It just wasn't like the jock culture wasn't something that I was interested in. I also was pretty shy. And so that made sales weird too for me. Like the idea of having to call strangers felt really hard. And like when I started, I had that first job, which again, I was driven to accept because I was broke. That would just like make me so nervous and keep me up at night. But through like the mentorship of my first boss, like realizing like, if you know your buyer persona and you know your target categories, like, and you know that you're actually helping provide a solution that will help them, like it's not scary. Like I had to really change that. So that was tough. And now to your point, like Scott, like closing deals, like there is nothing that feels better than like doing something like that. It's so fun.
So what if we were to ask your parents what they think of you having a career in sales? They shocked by it? They like, what are you doing? Or I mean, granted, they've probably grown accustomed to it and they're proud of all that you've accomplished, right? Like we get that, but what do you think their opinion was when you first started this sales as a potential career as opposed to just paying off the debt?
I don't know if they saw it as a potential career for me versus like that stepping stone to like make some money and get back into school. And so I
Do
think
they see it as a career now or still not?
Yeah, I think that they're shocked. Like when I started to move up at Eventbrite in particular, like my parents own, they're small business owners. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They own my brother now has taken it over. They own a small chemical production plant where they make cleaning products for like breweries. Like there's nothing more Milwaukee than that, right? So like they have business acumen. They also inherited that business through my grandparents suddenly, and they didn't expect to do that either. So like we have a similar story of like, we kind of fell into something and then lo and behold, it like just becomes your life. I think once I started to like move my way up and they saw that I was pretty fucking good at what I do, then they were like, all right, like proud of me and excited for me to do that. Because my family has never done stuff like this, like my parents didn't finish college. My brother didn't finish college, like that kind of stuff, where that this just felt different. And once I started to like, again, show progress there, then they were like, okay, good for you. But initially I think they were like, ooh, no, you're going to be a professor. Like, what are you doing? So.
Yeah. I think my parents still are confused that I'm in sales. And my mom to this day will still say, you've been such a good lawyer, Scott. You're so good at arguing things. Because,
I love that.
Being a VP of sales is lesser than being a lawyer, right?
Yes. It's so funny you say that. When I was I think I was at Eventbrite already, but I wasn't where I ended at Eventbrite. My dad also was like, you should really go to law school. Like, why are you not a lawyer? And he's like, and you can do things within, like you can work for like disenfranchised people, right? Like you don't have to be like a big, like, corporate lawyer or whatever. But he was really into that too. That's so funny.
So as so you're coming into a different place, right, with your career. I know a lot of people of your stature, not necessarily the tenure at one company, but very experienced, and you're in this very unique, weird world situation, right? And I know we've talked offline. You've been given the luxury to have some runway and time to sort of figure out your next move. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's trying to figure out their next move? And I know you're still figuring it out. You're still on that journey, but what have you learned? I know you talked about the networking piece. What else have you learned about this journey that you're on now?
Great question. And yeah, just to reiterate what you said, like I am incredibly fortunate. I'm very privileged. And so it's privilege. I have some savings. So I'm able to have the luxury of taking my time, which is just like, is so lucky. A lot of people can't. A lot of people who are at Eventbrite and who lost their jobs in the reduction had to find jobs the next day, right? And so that adds a layer of stress that I haven't had to experience. So I get to be maybe more thoughtful with it because I just get to be, it's not like I am more thoughtful. I just get to be. I think what's so interesting right now is, and everyone knows this, there are very few options. Like it's just not the market that it was in, end of February. And so learning right now, there's two things to it that I'm trying to understand. Trying to figure out like what is going to be viable in the world, whatever the world looks like as we come out of this, and not even when we're out, because like, not to get political, but we're going to be in this for a while, it looks like. So through the phasing of, at least this country reopening, like, what does that mean for buyer behavior? Like, what do consumers, like, what are they going to want to buy and when and how? And from a B2B perspective, like, what are businesses going to offer from a product and service perspective that is actually going to be sustainable, right? And I don't know those answers. And that's been really fucking hard because I'm a bit of a control freak and I like feeling like I'm measured in all of that. And so this is requiring a bit of more experimentation and like forcing myself to be okay with like maybe not having a job work for 7.5 years. Like that's obviously a new concept to me. Like how do I take a risk and a chance in a way that feels thoughtful and like intentional, but know that it might shit the bed like 3 months down the road and be okay with that, and not let that potential failure, quote unquote, keep me from taking that risk or taking that on. So that's something that I think this just isn't, this is such a different environment to find a job. This is so different than 2008, right? Like this is, we haven't experienced anything like this before. And so not knowing the answers has been really tough, and I have to be okay with that. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is, again, there's just not so many options out there. So what are some of those, like the core things that you absolutely need in a role, even if like, let's say the product isn't in the space that you really care about, right? Like, let's say you're like, oh God, another fucking collaboration software opportunity. Like, oh, like I'm so over it. But if that's what you're seeing and you need to get a job, like what do you look for in that business that's actually going to make that easier for you? For example, if you're an AE or an SDR or a CSM, how does that leadership team think about training and coaching and investment in you? Like, how can you use this as a way for you to be better at what you do, so that if this ends up not being the business that you want to stay at long term, how do you get the most from them? And I think that coaching piece is so crucial, and asking lots of questions around that and investment in you is really important. I think really understanding what your role is going to entail and asking questions around like, hey, if you're going to start an enterprise motion and they haven't done that yet, like what's your runway? Like what is the infrastructure in place to support enterprise deals? Like do you have an ABM plan, or is this all cold calling? And just really digging into those pieces so you know that you can be effective at what you're doing, even if it doesn't feel like it's your dream job. Or like, how do you make the most of what you're getting? And I think that to back into that, it's like, think of the 3 things or even the 2 things that are your non-negotiables that you have to have in order to take that on. And I'm, to be totally transparent, like I'm still trying to figure out like, what are my non-negotiables, you know?
I think, so this is my first piece of advice is stop overthinking all this shit.
Yeah.
Like, you're way overthinking this
Oh,
role
you
right
think
now.
that I do that?
Yeah.
I don't know why you would
So
do that, Richard.
stop being a Professor
Yeah. Oh
Coley.
God.
So
I can't give up the dream.
I know. Well, let me ask you this question, because maybe this will be the advice you need to give yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you said that, you know, unfortunately Eventbrite had to make some changes to people, and I assume those are probably SDRs and AEs and even directors or VPs.
Yeah.
For those people who don't have the luxury of a runway, what kind of advice are you giving them about the next job to take? Are you telling them to just take it and, you know, make sure you got your, you know, you can cover your rent and your health care and solve the rest later? Like, what advice are you giving to them in this situation? Because I think there's a lot of listeners who are in that part
Yeah.
too, who'd like some wisdom.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing is, if you don't have a financial situation to support you and to bolster you during this time, like desperate times call for desperate measures. Like get a fucking job and take a job, and you can continue to look for other work while you have a job. That's really hard to do. Like it's hard to balance that. Don't ever go into a situation that's going to be abusive or that is going to be, you know, like don't do that. Like I should just like caveat this, like don't take any job that feels like ethically bad for you, morally bad for you, or that like is just not good leadership. Like don't do that. But there are plenty of people hiring right now who are really good people and who are doing their best, and they want people who will work with them and will do their best as well. So if you can find that and you don't have a financial support system in place, like fucking do it. I get it, you know?
Chloe, go take your own advice. You have the financial support system. Stop looking for perfect. Right?
Yeah.
Don't let perfection stand in the way of progress.
That's true. Oh, perfection, not progress. That's one of my mottos. I mean, oh my God, no, progress, not perfection. Did I just like?
You just Freudian flipped it.
Yes, I did. Shoot.
Well done.
Yeah. Man.
Do you think that it's how do I phrase this? Do you think it is easier, the same, or more difficult today as a female sales leader trying to land another such gig?
I think that it's easier to get more conversations in place because it's trendy right now. It's hot, especially in the Valley, you know, like boards having a mandate to have, you know, a diverse board staff in whatever way, shape, or form that means. Like it's definitely, you can have more conversations. I think that what's tricky is that bias that is so ingrained in people, because not because people are bad, it's what we've been trained to do. Like, it's all constructed, right? I think getting further along in that process is still a challenge in some capacities. So yes and no in that sense.
What is the core challenge in your mind that we need to overcome in order to make a substantive impact and change that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it really comes from the top. So, I mean, you guys have probably heard this over and over, especially as of late. Like, you need to have a business that actually acts on its principles and doesn't just say those principles, because that's how you can begin to really tackle and attack implicit bias. And I think part of that is just knowing that you have it. Like, it's not going to change overnight, but being aware that your interview and recruiting process is really well thought out and really meaningful, and that you have some like checks and balances in it, so that your bias is, like, you can check and balance your own bias here and there. Like, having a business that's actually like doing the work to make some of those changes, even in something as tactical as an interview process, around what questions are you asking when you are reviewing resumes, what are you looking for when you're looking at education, like that sort of stuff. Like, taking it apart to that level and knowing that people are going to read that or see that or hear that and have, maybe one answer that, or one response that would be different than if somebody who looked just like them would have. That kind of stuff. And it's hard. It's not something you can do overnight. Like, really breaking that down. I think what I'm lucky to have is that, like, in where I'm at in my career and with my network, I have a lot of inbound, which is, like, again, so lucky. If I were, new to sales, it's a little bit trickier. And I think, to your point that you guys both made really beautifully earlier, like, that network is also somewhere that you should really lean into to help you, especially if you're a woman or a person of color, if you're older and getting into sales for the first time, et cetera. All those things that just make it more challenging for you.
Yeah, that's good. What can we do to help you as we wind down the show here? We always ask our guests, hey, how can we help you? Do you have any questions for us? Is there anything that you're working on right now or want to, kind of promote a little bit, or what can we do to support you?
You guys have both already been, I mean, you're relative strangers to me, and you both have been nothing but, like, just so embracing and just, like, so kind, not nice, but kind. And, like, but you're nice too, but I want to differentiate. Like, I think nice is one thing, but kindness is what's really important.
I'm known as the nice one. Scott's known as the asshole.
I'm also known as the one who's far kinder.
There you go. And really, you both have already just letting me yammer on at you for an hour. Like, that's a gift. So thank you, Richard. Like, your introductions, like, allowing me to attend your training for free. I mean, like, really, you guys are just so fucking great in that sense. And so you've already done a lot for me. If you, like, find a rad job that's, like, looking to hire a weird chick with tattoos, like, let me know. But I am good. I think what I would love, which you already do, so I'm telling you something, you're like, yeah, cool, like, we already do this, but, like, can you amplify, folks who don't look just like you or who don't have the same background as you, et cetera? I think that, like, right now, it's so, people are actually, so it can capitalize on this moment to do that. Like, it's just going to help those folks out even more,
Do you want to go early stage, 0 to 10 million? Do you want to go from 50 to, like, for people who are listening and they're like, oh my God, I need someone like this. Where do you want to put yourself? Or are you still trying to figure that out?
No, I mean, so if you had asked me this in February, it would have been like Series C and D companies, looking to scale. Like, I wanted to come in and, like, throw gasoline on something and just light it up, not like burn it to the ground, but, like, really optimize and scale. Where we're at right now in the world, I am talking to folks who are in earlier stages and looking to build. And that's something that I thought for sure I wouldn't want to be doing. But I think that's actually, like, really an exciting opportunity right now, and one that I'm giving more credence to than I would have in, again, Feb or Jan of this year. So that doesn't really answer your question, because I'm looking at, like, a lot of across the board. But what I care about is, like, working as a salesperson is working for a company that is truly creating a service or a product that will actually fulfill a tangible need, and that opportunity of that product or service is like there's so much you can do with that. Like building that go-to-market strategy is just so fun. And then having the team around to actually execute on it, there's just nothing better. And so if that means that you're doing that in a really early company, but one that is beginning to get its legs and is proving, their efficacy there, like awesome. Or someone who, is a little bit later, like C or D, like that also is super exciting. So it's where can I come in and like actually make some change and break some shit. I love that.
Awesome.
And not working for assholes, because I also am like an inherent 15-year-old and I can be mouthy, so I have a hard time when people are dicks.
Perfect. I have tons of these kind of roles all the time, so make sure that we stay in touch, and
yes,
if I can be helpful, I'll certainly do my best to help you find a good spot. So thanks for spending some time with us. It's been fun chatting with you and getting to know you, and best of luck in the future. Look forward to following your career.
Seriously, thanks you guys. Like I'm already obsessed with you too. So thanks you might regret it now, but thanks for bringing me into your world. And you're doing amazing shit. So thank you. On like behalf of the sales force of, the world, thank you. And happy early birthday, Scott.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Chloe.
Thanks, Chloe. Good to chat with you.
Thanks, you guys. Seriously, thanks so much. Take care.